Over in the pages of Marvel Comics, the character of Madelyne Pryor has been on a fascinating storyline, culminating in the end of Spider-Man's Dark Web storyline. Madelyne recently decided to atone from some of her sins and is now operating out of the Limbo Embassy. Madelyne went ahead and took her team of DarkXMen to do battle against the anti-mutant group known as Orchis. However, Maddie's fight over against Orchis ended with a fatal blow over to Alex Summers' Havok, as well as the kidnapping of Warren Worthington, also known as Archangel. My name is Araco Braddock, and today, let's go ahead and see if Madelyne is able to reunite with the mutants over in the pages of DarkXMen issue 2. Before we get deeper into the video, I want to encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button over on our content. Save them all or die trying. The DarkXmen's first rescue mission ended in blood and flame. The team is already at each other's throats, and the Fallen now rise against them. Plus, Madelyne Pryor makes the worst possible mistake in a horror story. Never, ever split up. DarkXMen issue 2 is written over from Steve Foxe, featuring art from Jonas Scharf, colors from Frank Martin, letters from VC's Clayton Cowles, and we have design from Tom Muller and Jay Bowen. In addition, the cover for the issue is coming in directly over from Steven Segovia and Frank Martin. Really appreciate how Segovia is able to render some of the characters of the DarkXMen, especially the character of Gimmick, who has some really fascinating scenes later on over in the comic book issue. I want to extend a quick thank you over to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting this comic book preview and discuss the artwork over from artist Jonas Scharf in a little bit more detail here. Really found that Jonas Scharf was able to capture the tense facial expressions and the irreverent creatures over from Limbo to accommodate the heady script over in DarkXMen Chapter 2. The Banff Dragon scene on this opening page looks absolutely amazing. And I really like how we get a tease over at this dark version of Madelyne Pryor, who was hinted at in some of the final pages of DarkXMen. In fact, this storyline follows up on several cliffhangers from the past issue in some really interesting ways here. In this second page, we get introduced over to Orchis agents Krull and Valens, who both have some interesting backstory that's fleshed out over on the comic book page. In fact, this page in the issue also introduces some of the gorgeous colors over from Frank Martin in some really interesting ways. I love how the face of Angel seen over in the last panel on the comic book page contrasts with the red background, as well as the hair from this alternate version over from Madelyne in the comic book issue. Really think that the art team just does a great job capturing some of the tense expressions for these Orchis agents, Madelyne, as well as Archangel over in this final panel. Over on the next page of the issue, Jonas Scharf and writer Steve Foxe follow up on yet another aspect of the cliffhanger as Madelyne attempts to nurse Alex Summers, also known as Havok, back to health after the devastating blow landed to him in the previous installment. Really think Scharf manages to capture the broken and bloodied face over from Alex Summers' Havok in a really beautiful panel here. Across this comic book issue, I think Scharf in particular lends so much characterization to Havok from the facial expressions alone. There's a really fantastic scene over with Havok and Gimmick late in the issue where the two are able to catch up with each other and talk just as relatable human beings as opposed to really heady mutants operating out of the Limbo Embassy. I really found that writer Steve Foxe does a fantastic job fleshing out some of the interpersonal political team dynamics over in the comic book series. Seeing Azazel and Maggot argue with each other about trying to save Archangel definitely lends an interesting character-first narrative over to some of these chapters, and I also liked how Gambit was the one who ended up breaking off the fight between these two individuals over in the comic book series. I also found that color artist Frank Martin once again really stepped up here to show the contrast in some of the colors between Azazel and Maggot's skin, contrasting the red and blue hues over in the issue yet again on the comic book page. Some of the tense elements of this issue really managed to keep intact in some of the later scenes in the issue, as we learn that the character of Albert is actually operating as a spy for some of the Orcus agents. Really think the issue managed to capture some interesting sense of intrigue amidst all of the insane plotting over in the comic book series. As we mentioned earlier here, some of the scenes over with Gimmick and Havok at the Limbo Embassy really managed to capture the characterization of both these individuals in intriguing ways. Carmen, the character of Gimmick, is so new over to Marvel Comics continuity that I think she has so much potential to grow. And I really love the fact that we got to see the DarkXMen rescue her over from Orcus in the last issue of the series. Also found it really interesting how Gimmick took on a new name and seemingly updated her costume in a very subtle way over in the series. We were introduced to the concept of the Mercy Crown in the last issue of DarkXMen, being a Limbo-esque reforge of the Cerebro machine that Professor Xavier uses to locate mutants. In this comic book series, we learn that the Mercy Crown is powered by looking into the souls of some of these individuals, and this is a really fantastic moment for DarkXMen to reference not only the core X-Men series, but so many titles across FallofX. Getting to see Jonas Scharf in particular render some of these comic book characters from other issues like Iceman in the context of a DarkXMen comic book was absolutely thrilling to me, and a great way to show just how cohesive the entire line of X-Men comic books are right now. I also really like the fact that Madelyne is trying to reunite some of her fellow mutants together and really end the FallofX status quo for some of these individuals. Madelyne's adventures lead her and the DarkXMen over to Mexico, plus the cliffhanger for the issue just does a phenomenal job filling in on the cliffhanger from the last issue and informing what some of the greater plans for Orcus are over in the comic book series. So at the end of the day here, I really thought that the second chapter of DarkXMen did a phenomenal job fleshing out some of the plans for Orcus and the motivations behind Havok and Madelyne Pryor operating out of the Limbo Embassy, getting to know these two individuals of Krull and Valance over in the comic book series was really, really fascinating. Particularly liked all the scenes introducing the cybernetic elements, and I thought it was really interesting too how this book managed to capitalize on some of the intrigue from Orcus, using the character of Albert as a spy for Orcus into the DarkXMen. I also found that the characterization for Havok in particular in this comic book issue did a fantastic job humanizing him as a character. I also think that the individual of Carmen, also known as Gimmick, takes on some great sense of progression in this issue, which even is acknowledged directly from Madelyne herself. I didn't expect to get a shout out to all of the other X-Men comic books so early in this DarkXMen title, but was really glad to see this referenced here. Really do think that writer Steve Foxe managed to find some interesting elements of characterization throughout this X-Men team. I'm very excited for some more team dynamics to develop among characters like Azazel and Maggot over in the comic book series. Also think that artist Jonas Scharf really manages to evoke the dark and harrowing tone of DarkXMen with some really, really beautiful pencils emphasized by gorgeous shading, as well as some beautiful red and blue hues throughout the issue over from Frank Martin. I want to know from you, are you still enjoying DarkXMen issue 2 as much as I am? What are some of your thoughts on the harrowing cliffhanger for the issue and how Orcus managed to use the character of Albert? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for coming to check out our video review over for DarkXMen issue 2, and we'll be back to see where this series and FallofX is headed next in the near future. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.